let's talk about deployment security. And this is when we are actually deploying to pre-production environments as well as production environments. Because anytime we're going to have just fill in the blank, credentials in our config files, just so that the application can run locally with no sensitive data. But especially as we get to UAT or staging environments and then to production, we're going to have some credentials that access real things even before production. For example, if you integrate payments with PayPal, you're going to have credentials to a real PayPal account of some sort. So you're going to have credentials in a non-production environment. And so you still need to have production level controls, because for the people who are testing your software, that's their production environment. Okay, even though we don't call it there. Just like a TDD environment is your developer's production environment, and the build server is the developer's production environment. If the build server goes down, it's a 7-1 issue from the developer's perspective. Yeah, the users of your end software, they don't even know or care. But for the developers, that's a 7-1 issue. That's their production environment. They can't do their job because the build server is down. All right, enough of that soapbox. But when it comes to credentials, again, use LastPass, use Azure Key Vault. Most of the time, it's sufficient to use a secret store and then put those secrets in a encrypted key value pair in Octopus Deploy or Azure Pipelines, because those tools keep them as one-way encrypted tokens, and they can't be reversed out. So do that. And then build your variables, such as connection strings, build them by embedding secrets using the tokens, as opposed to putting them in as literals and then repeating them, because your connection string is going to be a little bit long, and part of it is sensitive and other parts is not sensitive. So you don't want to have, if you don't embed the variables, then it's going to be tempting for the team not to press that little lock button and encrypt it, because they can't see any of it. So you want to use the encryption. And then whenever the debug output is being emitted to the logs, if something came from a secret variable, you're only going to see some asterisk in the logs. It will not output to any of the debug logs something that came from a secret variable. Okay. And then in the environment itself, a lot of times, if we have access to a, pre-production environment or production environment, it's normal for developers to have some sort of, whether it's through the Kudu console or SSH, or in some cases, FTP, if you're still using it, access to the directories on the server that the code went to or the assemblies went to. Well, that's where the app settings.json is, with the the secrets poked into it. So take care that we're not giving unnecessary access to the actual server directories to people that really don't need access to that. All right. So this is how you should be thinking about the structure of your deployment pipeline. And again, this is modeled with the absolute minimum number of environments that you will ever have, which is 3. Because again, you need, there are 3 unique types of environments in a DevOps environment, and you need at least 1 of each. The production environment, the environment in which you're going to do some sort of manual testing, manual checking, and then the TDD environment, which is for automated tests, okay? And so the process that should happen is, on your build server, it runs the integration build and it produces your release candidate. Now, your release candidate, again, can have multiple packages, because an application, it's very common to have a website and a database, and maybe a backend job, and maybe a web service, and maybe a little desktop system tray, WPF application. So however many unique processes need to be deployed to deploy this version, well, that's how many NuGet packages you're going to have, or zip files you're going to have, or little miniature Docker containers you're going to have. But that all represents a single release candidate. It has a name, it has a version, and we're going to store that in Azure Artifacts. Now, there's other solutions, but if you're using Azure Pipelines, Azure Artifacts is the go-to store. It is a full-blown NuGet server. And so we're going to, when we deploy to a particular environment, we are going to have our automation go to Azure Artifacts and ask for the release candidate of application A, version such and such. And then our automation script is going to deploy all of the deployable packages of that release candidate to the target environment. It doesn't matter if it's the TDD environment, the UAT environment, the production environment, the process is the same. That means that by the time we deployed to the production environment, we're going and getting the exact release candidate, same version from NuGet, from Azure Artifacts, and we're running the same script to deploy it to the production environment. There are some people in this industry that have processes that, I'm going to air quotes, that quote, build to UAT and quote, build to production. And what it's actually doing is going back to the Git repository and recompiling from source, and then putting together a new package that has never had the acceptance test run against it, and that has never had any testing run against it, and deploying it to the UAT environment or the production environment. And that opens up the door for things to get in. Okay. If you always go back to your Azure Artifact store and get the same release candidate that has previously had every other security control run against it, you are minimizing the surface area where it's possible for some nefarious code to get in there. If you're doing a recompile to UAT, a recompile to production, well, guess what? Unless you've explicitly checked in every single package, which is less common these days, it's also going and saying, hey, NPM, hey, NuGet, are there any new packages that I should download on the fly? Okay, let me download this package again on the spot because I'm producing this new release candidate package. That's why that UA parser.js, that's why it was so widespread, because so many people do that process.